The AGAR. Firstly, I want to talk about the end of the financial year, which is rapidly approaching. I have spoken to many clerks over the last few months who have told me that they find the year-end process stressful and difficult. Broadly speaking, there seems to be three main reasons for this. Difficulties collating the accounts data, lack of knowledge of the process, lack of time. Let's look at each of these in turn. Difficulties collating the accounts data. However you keep your data, be it written in a book, on a spreadsheet or in account software, it clearly needs to be up to date and accurate. This means, where possible, regularly entering your payments and receipts so that you don't end up with a backlog of data entry to do at key times. As well as this, carrying out regular bank reconciliations will help you confirm that your records are correct and that the reports you are providing to your counsellors are based on accurate data. If you can do this on a monthly basis, then if you do come across a reconciliation difference, the amount of data you need to check back through is limited to just the 1 month. Equally, there ideally needs to be enough information held that will enable you to complete the annual return without having to keep referring to paperwork for missing information not entered in your cashbook. For example, staff costs need to be listed separately to payments on the accounting statement, so clearly it makes sense to have a separate code for this or an easy way to filter to get the total you need without having to trawl through 12 months of data adding it all back up. You also need to be certain that, as well as completing the AGAR itself, that you provide all the additional data required by the auditor. This is obviously best done as part of the year-end process, and it is preferable not to have to come back to this as a result of a query from the auditor, not least because it will likely incur an additional fee. The information required by the auditor will depend on the level of review your counsel requires, but it is good practice to make sure you are fully aware of all the information that you will need to submit and in what format. For example, I have seen particular notes from the auditor regarding variances that require explanation. It is not acceptable to purely provide an extract from your cashbook. The auditor wants to confirm that you, as the RFO, fully understand the reason for the variance. And equally, ensure that you do not provide information that is not required. Further details of all of this will be available on your auditor's website or in the correspondence you will receive directly from them towards the end of the year. Lack of knowledge of the process. There have been a few changes over the last few years to the way the AGAR is completed, which can often be frustrating, particularly when you are used to a certain process that is then changed. If you are not already aware, you will be pleased to know that there are only minor amendments to the Practitioner's Guide to completing the 2018-19 year, and no changes to how the AGAR itself needs to be completed. One of the biggest changes in recent years is the option for a local council to exempt themselves from external audit. It is only available to councils with both income and expenditure of less than £25,000, providing that they have been in existence since the 1st of April 2014 and had no issues with the previous audit. The option has been available since the previous financial year and means that if a council has not exceeded the £25,000 threshold, they can certify themselves as exempt from audit. Although there is still the requirement to complete the AGAR, the only paperwork that needs to be sent to the auditor is a certificate of exemption and their contact details. The audit firm PKF Littlejohn have reported a misunderstanding in that the completed annual return and associated paperwork was still being submitted by many councils who had declared themselves exempt, so be aware of this if you declare your council exempt from next year's audit. If your council is too large to exempt themselves, then they will be subject to an external audit in the normal way. It is also really important to be aware of the timetable you're working towards and what you need to achieve and by when. Section 1, the annual governance statement, and Section 2, the accounting statements of the AGAR, must be approved by the first working day of July, which this year will be Monday the 1st. So clearly, all the accounts prep will need to have been completed well before then to enable it to be signed off before this date. As you'll be aware, there also needs to be a 30-day period for the exercise of public rights, which must include the first 10 working days of July. The earliest date that this can commence is Monday the 3rd of June. And finally, don't forget that your accounts need to be published on your website as soon as possible after the completion of the audit, but by no later than the 30th of September. Alongside the accounts, there are other requirements of documents to be published, so it is worth making sure you're aware of what's required. Many clerks I've spoken to weren't aware that more documentation other than the accounts and the minutes of the council meetings were required. For example, if your council has exempted themselves from the external audit, they will be bound by the Transparency Code. This requires further information to be published. This includes a list of items of expenditure over £100. Lack of time. Lack of time seems to be a real issue for clerks and RFOs. Many I speak to fit being a clerk around a proper job, as they call it, and many are working more hours than they are contracted to, particularly at year end. This is not only due to the increased workload related to completing the AGAR, but because the other tasks within the role still have to be done. And then there are the clerks who are employed by more than one council, further exacerbating the pressure they find themselves under to complete multiple year ends. I think there has to be an expectation of an increased time factor to complete the AGAR, simply because there is an additional work involved in comparison to a normal month. However, if you have been able to set aside time to tidy up your data and get it to its most usable state, then this should present a time saving at year end. Also, being fully aware of the process and the associated timetable should enable you to at least see the deadlines you're working towards. Having said that, I am aware of some clerks who have found themselves with a reduced amount of time to complete the year-end process, simply down to the date of their meetings. One particular council only meet every other month, and in order to get the account signed off in time for the inspection period, this had to be done at the May meeting, seriously limiting the amount of time the RFO had to prepare the accounts. This therefore relates to my previous point in terms of being fully aware of the timetable and working to match the time the clerk or RFO has and the date of the relevant meetings to provide the best use of time. I hope that you found this short video relevant and interesting. If you'd like any further information or to ask any questions, please feel free to contact me at hello@scribeaccounts.com.